Hi, everyone. Today we're talking about gender issues globally. This is, without question, even if we were in class, this is the topic that I would not be able to do justice to. Um, and especially without class, because most of what we would do today in class is have a discussion together and let you guys sort of be the voices. So, me being the voice of this not only is not very good, it also doesn't really symbolize what we're talking about very well either. So, hopefully, at the end, in our assignment, our discussion, you'll have a chance to we'll have a chance to sort of talk together about this in kind of a weird way, but that we'll just see how it works out. I do want to highlight a few things though, without going too in depth. This particular thing here is it's on the Canvas page at the bottom. Again, if we were in class, I would hand this out to you guys and we'd talk about some of the things on this list. I should just note that I did this list about 10 years ago. And while I update a few things every once in a while, whenever I go back and look, I got this from the Human Rights Watch World Report. They do a world report every year. They don't do it by topic, they do it by country. So it's a little tricky to kind of go through there and find all the issues that sort of pertain to women's rights in there. But I try to do it, and every year I come to the conclusion of I really don't need to change this much, which is a kind of a sad thing. A lot of the problems are still the same. Maybe not the same exact thing or in the same exact country, but this is a pretty representative list. Not representative is not the right word. It's not like we have solved child brides in the last 10 years. I guess that's what I mean by this. So I just want to highlight a few broad things, maybe talk about a couple issues, but I don't want to go in depth on this because honestly, this is a topic that could go on and on and on. And again, I don't know that I'm the right person to do that. So let's just a few things I want to highlight here. Just starting up here. By the way, this PDF thing is called iAnnotate. Love this thing. So the list is far from comprehensive. I mean, this is just a few things. And it says some of the most pressing abuses of women's rights. I suppose if you read through it and add everything together, but I'm not even sure that that's necessarily true. It's just a list of things that are very specific for human rights. What this list does not include down below is human rights that don't specifically target women. So this is just stuff that really, the stuff on this list down below is stuff that specifically targets women. But what we know, obviously, is that women tend to be affected harder by many human rights abuses. So, for example, if we talk about human rights abuses that are endemic in refugee camps, we know that women make up the highest percentage of people in refugee camps. So it shouldn't be that big of a shock to know that those things will impact women, even though they don't target specifically women. The list also does not include the fact that women are underrepresented politically around the world. It's one of the things that video you watched from the UN, Side by Side, was talking about. Essentially, it was UN. This is the wrong color. Anyways, UN. Does this one do it? That's better. 1325. UN Resolution 1325, which talks about having more women in positions of authority. So that will have an impact on conflict around the world. It should reduce it ideally. So women tend to lack the access to political, economic, and legal systems to affect changes in the abuses listed below. One of the things I liked about that video, one of the things it talked about was imagine a room where 10 men are talking about issues, and then imagine a room where 10 women are talking about issues. How would those two rooms be different? What topics would they be talking about? How would they be talking about sort of developing them? So if women are underrepresented politically, at the very least we would say probably the topics that are at the top of the list to talk about are not topics that are as important to women as they are to men. So just at the very least, even if men and women would have the same answers to problems, the question is, what are they even talking about? What's on the agenda? And if women aren't in the room, women's issues aren't going to be on the agenda. Domestic violence, sexual abuse, rape are pervasive around the world. So they're not specifically listed on this list, But honestly, it's because the things on the list tend to be things that are things that aren't the normal. And unfortunately, these things tend to be normal around the world. And that is something that we would really like to get past. Normal is not the right word. Pervasive maybe is better. Is that the word I use? Oh, pervasive right there. Yeah, and that is something that, not cool. In the U.S., women in general receive less pay for equal work. Now, there have been studies to show that it's not like businesses are out there saying, I'm going to pay, okay, there's a man, there's a woman, I'm going to pay that woman less. But there are systems in place, whether it's cultural, social, economic, that actually end up making statistically the case that women do end up making less pay for equal work. And women frequently work in jobs that have been considered quote unquote women's work. And those women's work jobs historically have gotten lower wages just because that's how it's been. So that's a tricky thing as well. How do I put this? It's not that a lot of people, there are some, don't get me wrong on this, but especially in, like, say, the United States, I mean, we've really tried to make this move where people are not overtly discriminatory against women. Like, that is sort of a big no-no. But that doesn't mean that there's not systemic, subconscious reasons, things going on that cause women's discrimination to still happen, even though no one's sitting there saying, not no one, few people are sitting there saying, I hope this happens. Another thing we see around the world is this thing called the feminization of poverty. This refers to the fact that 70% of the world's adults that live in poverty are women. That's more than a statistical difference, that 70% of the world's adults that live in poverty are women. And then because women don't, in many societies, don't have the tools to be able to pull themselves out of this. For example, 65% of all literate adults are women. 60% of all primary school age not attending school are female. That makes this, sort of perpetuates this into the future. One more element, and that is something we don't think about that much in the United States because we just say, if you get divorced or you get widowed, women work as much as men do, so you just get a job, everything's fine. But what about a society in which women don't traditionally have jobs? Or you could say it this way, that even if women can work, this society maybe values women more for being mothers. And so what then happens to those women when they're widowed or when there's a divorce? Even if they can enter the workplace, they're not trained, skilled, or have had the ability to do that. And I didn't even mention abandon, which is a big deal around the world as well. One more idea that I want to mention here is that's the female double-day workload, which refers to that phenomenon that is probably not going to be that alien to you, that women, especially in the West, now have jobs. But women also tend to be the people who go home and take care of the family as well. So they're expected to put in a full day work outside the home, plus do their normal levels of cooking, cleaning, laundry, all that kind of stuff. And so one study of women in Latin America showed that women working outside the home average 70 hours per week at home, of work per week at home, while their husbands put in an average of 5.5 hours a week at home, per week at home. Again, this has to do with sort of gender stereotypes and traditional roles that have been sort of assigned. And so why would I clean the dishes? That's the woman's job. And it's not really even a conversation that I would have. I just wouldn't do the dishes. It just wouldn't be something I'd even think about. And so as more women are going into the workplace, which we think that's a good idea, they still bear the brunt of a lot of the work in the household. And that's something that is difficult to change. And quite honestly, even in the United States, I don't think there has been a study on this, but I would say there'd still be a difference. Probably not quite as drastic here, but there'd still be some version of this female double day workload, even in sort of a, quote unquote the most progressive United States. Just looking at some of these things, and I don't want to go in depth on all these things. There's stuff about witchcraft. There's stuff about, again, well, I won't even go into that. And this is things we would talk about if we were sort of together, if we were actually together. and talk about sort of why these things. What are sort of the, I keep saying sort of, what are the things behind these particular things? Like, for example, we know, let me go up here to this one. Here's Liberia. The traditional practice of killing witches continues in villages. Alleged witches are forced to drink poisonous sap of local sassawood tree in order to prove their guilt or innocence. There's a whole long conversation there about why societies, A, think witchcraft is a thing, B, tend to punish women more than men for it. And it has to do with economic, cultural, all that sort of stuff. We're not going to go into it now, but it's actually very interesting in terms of how it's come about, and why it sort of persists today. Another thing that's a big issue in Africa, for example, is this idea right here of school-based violence. So now more and more women, girls, can go to school, but are those schools safe places? Are they set up for women? Are they for things that women in particular are going to be addressing? So, for example, girls who have their period, are they not allowed to go to school, during that time? If they do go to school, are there hygiene issues and all that kind of stuff? Are the schools prepared for those things? Does the society have schools that are prepared for that? Then we can also add this idea of school-based violence, is that the sort of the teacher female student interaction, how does that sort of play out in places like Africa that don't have a long tradition of these things, where it's sort of been worked through? Let me see here. What else? Excuse me. There are lots of things. Another interesting is not the right word. Concerning thing are honor killings. This has been something we've talked about for decades. I don't think honor killings are going to be a new idea to you. What's new is that they're kind of still with us, even though a lot of countries have said honor killings aren't okay, and they passed laws against them. That doesn't mean those laws have been enforced rigorously. And so even though maybe we can say glass half full, positives, there's been more laws against honor killings. Glass half empty, honor killings still happen. Let's see here. Sorry, you just have to work with me here for a second. I don't know. One thing, I don't have it on here. I guess I kind of do. Kyrgyzstan is well known for having one of the higher incidents of child brides, but it also has this thing called bride kidnapping. So let's talk about this for a second. How do I put this? Let's say that there's somebody, okay, let's say you're a guy, and let's say there's somebody that you want to marry. What you can do, and has historically but traditionally been done there, which is the sort of the quote-unquote thing, is you can kidnap her. And now that you've kidnapped her, she's technically quote-unquote unclean. She's not pure anymore. And so now you can marry her relatively easy, because there isn't all the sort of difficulties with, she can do better than you. And so what that ends up in doing is encouraging this idea of bride kidnapping, which gets younger and younger with child brides and things like that. As it says up here, if a woman is abused, attacked, or raped, the woman is encouraged by the authorities to actually reconcile with the abuser rather than seek legal remedies, including, when I say reconcile, that means like get married. So if you are raped, then marriage is the best way to sort of solve everyone's problem from the perspective of the family. You can understand why this is super, super problematic. Human trafficking is a thing that, again, is not specific for women, but obviously it does affect far more women than it affects men. And on and on and on. And there are many, many things like that. Again, this is not intended to depress you or to make you think, oh, this is completely awful, which it is completely awful. But it does mean that there is a long, long, long ways to go until we can sort of talk about gender equality, where we can talk about human rights that women can sort of enjoy, as opposed to just human rights that humans can enjoy. So now let me just talk very quickly about what I'm going to have you do for your assignment today. There's this larger report from UN Women, and it's called The Progress of the World's Women 2019 to 2020. So about every 5 years, they do this large report on some issue for women. So I don't know that this is necessarily the topic that I would think is the most important, but it's the one they've done in the last 5 years. It's a really important study, and so that's why we're going to sort of work our way through it together. It's about families in a changing world. So it's really focusing on family issues and the role of women in families. So what we're going to do, what I'm having you do is I'm going to have you read the executive summary. That's pages 14 to 17. It's a larger PDF. It's like a full book. And then we're going to work through this together. So what I want you to do is you go to the table of contents and you'll see that there are, I think, 6 or 7 chapters, and the chapters are broken up into about 5 sections. So 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, whatever. What I want you to do is I want you to pick one of those sections, 2.5, 5.3, whatever that happens to be. And then I want you to read that. And then for the discussion, you're going to, very briefly in a paragraph, try to explain to the rest of the class what the issue is that's being talked about there and why it's important. And what I'm hoping we can do is, by having this in discussion form, if we all sort of, to the best of our ability, don't worry if you duplicate here or there, but to the best of our ability, if we all kind of hit different parts of the report, sort of by the end we get to the end of the discussion, we'll have a good idea of the report together as a class. It's sort of reading together. So when you're thinking about the reading, think about how you're going to explain what you've been reading to the rest of the class in sort of in a paragraph, and how you can clearly do that. And that'll give us a better idea about what's going on with this and some issues that are really pertinent to women today. And that is it. Again, I have to really apologize. I don't do this topic justice. I wish I did. And I will see you. We have one more day, so I'll see you guys tomorrow.